Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive videos, I'm going to explore the journey of the fleet-footed messenger planet Mercury through the earthy, important cardinal sign of Capricorn. This began on the 1st of December, but it's going to conclude in its initial pass on the 23rd of December. And this is because as we came into December, Mercury had already been in its pre-retrograde shadow for 1 week. It goes retrograde on the 13th of December, moves back into Sagittarius on the 23rd. As we go into the new year, Mercury is just still in retrograde, but goes direct on the 2nd of January, returns to the sign of Capricorn on the 14th of January, and emerges from the post-retrograde shadow on the 21st of January. So the whole process from the 25th of November right through to the 21st of January is around about 10 weeks. So whilst we can look at Mercury and Capricorn, we do need to stay mindful of that big picture. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have you with us. This is very much a community. People do chat to one another and give each other support. And if you have any thoughts, please share them. I do interact with each one. If you're a returning visitor, it's lovely to have your company once more. And your likes, comments, shares and subscriptions are truly appreciated. Now, with year 2024 just around the corner now, if you'd like to watch your deep dive zodiac forecast for next year, please see the link beneath this video. Each of those videos has been very carefully put together and I feel will give you searing insights of what you can expect next year. Also, if you'd like to understand what next year holds for you in terms of your personal astrology, if you order your forecast, you'll also get the rest of what's left of this year free, and also your character analysis report. But along with those, you will get your zodiac forecast for all 12 signs, Vedic forecast for all 12 signs, and Chinese forecast for all 12 signs, absolutely free. But the overall package is 30% off. Please see the link beneath this video. So what about Mercury in Capricorn? Well, Capricorn is the 10th zodiac sign, and it's the sign of culmination in the physical world. So when we're dealing with things that we can see, that we can build up, structures, it's ruled by the strict but also very pragmatic energies of Saturn. It's an earth sign, so it's looking for tangible results, but it's also cardinal, so very much a leadership sign. We could say that Capricorn is very much to do with well-established institutions, but also authority. But I think it's always important to think about wisdom. You know, sometimes these things might seem a bit old fuddy-duddy, but there's a lot of experience that's been built up over a long period of time that manifests itself through the sphere of Capricornian energy. But Mercury, of course, is a very bright, quick-moving energy. So for people who have Mercury in Capricorn natally, and also what we can expect over this period whilst Mercury is making its way through Capricorn, it's going to ask us to be more business-minded, practical, to assess the functionality of things. So we can have a great idea, how will it actually work, what's the nuts and bolts. People with Mercury in Capricorn can be shrewd, so we're being asked to assess things very carefully. If we need to plan something, we need to look for what the outcome would be that really is something that's workable. There can be a kind of a little bit of an old-fashioned take. Perhaps we're all going to, especially with all these scams going around these days, this can really up our desire to be very skeptical about any possible transaction that we might undertake, but particularly online. But one of the things that Mercury in Capricorn asks us to do is to be concise, to really cut things up into small segments that are very understandable and relatable. Basically cut to the chase, don't waffle. So that's the great thing about Mercury in Capricorn. So let's take a look at the solar event chart that we can all relate to, that starts at 0 degrees Aries on the vernal point and puts the position of Mercury at 0 degrees in the 10th house in Capricorn. So this solar event chart shows a great link with Saturn, and that became exact on the 2nd of December. There's of course a mutual receptivity there because Saturn's the ruler of Capricorn. But Saturn in Pisces is a bit more emotional and can bring just a little bit of a different perspective to the more crusty influence of Mercury in Capricorn. So that's really nice. That's also going to be repeated, in fact, and that's going to occur on the 21st of December, but it will build up in influence from the 18th through to the 22nd within 3 degrees, but this will be once Mercury is in retrograde. The other thing to look out with this particular event is the fact that the moon in Cancer, which is its home sign, is actually in opposition with Pluto. Now that's one of the most highly charged aspects you can have in astrology. Pluto very much about power, the moon very much about nurture and receptiveness. And what it can create is a polarization, and things can be very up and down. Now Venus, the planet of relating, ironically is T-squaring those two positions. So it suggests, particularly through to the 23rd of December in the run-up to Christmas, there can be some highs and lows in emotion. And that's where the slightly more detached and cool energy of Mercury in Capricorn can be very good to try and help us step back a little bit, not quite get so swept up. You know, there's always last minute changes of plan, and of course with Mercury going retrograde mid-month, the chances of that happening are increased, clearly. But we also have from the 4th to the 20th within 3 degrees, so that's a real long time, a superb link between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury is the planet of commerce, Jupiter the planet of trade. They're both in earth signs. Jupiter may be retrograde, and as we start this month, it has been so for 3 months, and will go direct on the 31st of December. But this angle can bring some real positivity, but also some real opportunities. Now this is where the crusty energy of Mercury in Capricorn can be very good, because it challenges the more expansive vibe of Jupiter, which can get a little bit carried away, promise more than it can realistically deliver. But I feel that that could see many people being quite skilled at squeezing more from their assets than they may fear they can actually do, and could lead to some surprising financial news in terms of the markets, I feel. But we also have that repeated exactly on the 18th of December, but that's because of the retrograde. Now Mercury is also forging a beautiful link with Venus, exact on the 11th of December, but that goes on from the 6th to the 14th, within 3 degrees. Venus about relating, but also, guess what, about money. And by that time it's in the sign of Scorpio, because it moves from Libra into Scorpio on the 4th of December. So again, that could be a portent for some surprising news, maybe interest rates down a little bit more than people expected. But Mercury does square up to Saturn, and that becomes exact on the 27th of December, after Mercury inverts back into the sign of Sagittarius. And in fact, it's going to go on through the first 2 weeks of January. So I feel the last part of this year, even if on the 27th of December we do have a glorious trine between the Sun and Jupiter, which can be very, very lucky, there is the potential for real confusion, because with Mercury needing to be very factual and detailed and deliver messages, and then in Sagittarius having a little bit of a tendency to inflate the reality because of the rulership of Jupiter, and then when you put Neptune in the mix, things can get really distorted. So I think we have to be realistic that we're in a pre-retrograde shadow as Mercury moves into Capricorn. Capricorn energy can be very good for cutting through and getting to what's really meaningful. but it is going to be retrograde from the 13th. A lot of people will be travelling over the festive period. Once Mercury inverts back into Sagittarius, that influences long distance travel. Mercury itself can influence short distance travel. If we are wanting to transact anything, whether it is something online or it is something more to do with business or a property matter, the chances are that something could come up which is a fly in the ointment. But it all depends on our mentality about Mercury retrograde, because some people are so convinced that Mercury retrograde is going to cause issues, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think most experienced astrologers would say that Mercury retrograde can cause some glitches, but what Mercury retrograde asks us to do is to recalibrate, rework, reorder the things that Mercury is influencing. So it's going across two signs. The sign of Capricorn, the 10th house, is our business interactions, applying for jobs, anything to do with relationships and communication with people in a position of influence. But equally, the retrograde through the sign of Sagittarius can be to do with where we want to be generous, we want to travel, we want to expand, well, we need to make sure that we got all the details lined up and worked out should things go awry that we can't control. But what we can all do is concentrate more on those details and take the maximum amount of personal responsibility, and that will diminish the options for things going awry. And because we have got these terrific links, Mercury and Jupiter can be very, very fortunate. Mercury forging a great link with Venus, very fortunate. And of course the Sun in a great link with Jupiter on the 27th, very fortunate. So good things can come to us, perhaps some surprisingly good things, but at the same time we need to use that energy, that business-like energy, that Saturnian energy, to be very scrutinizing, perhaps a little bit skeptical about some things that we might hear, but that will help us to stay earthed and also give us a sense of a little bit of control and authority over what we're trying to achieve. Very Capricornian energies. Please stay with me. I'm going to go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces for what you can expect over the next 2 months in terms of Mercury going through both Capricorn and Sagittarius. So Aries, for you, Mercury moving into the top of your chart, the 10th house, gives you a number of different options. If you're not feeling particularly happy in a work role at the moment, when Mercury moves across the 10th house cusp, one of the things it can trigger is a desire to retrain, reskill, or to reorder our talents in a new and fresh way. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the process is going to pan out quite as quickly as you might like. Why? Because of the timing. This is a time of year when many companies have holidays, things and people aren't quite as accessible. But what you can do through this whole period is do a lot of thinking and a lot of discussion to try to get a greater understanding of all your options. And that's really, really exciting. But it's also true that Mercury in the 10th house could see you taking on some kind of leading role, providing guidance to others. So that's really exciting as well. If you do have older folks still in your family, it could also be a time when you're going to be working hard at looking out for their needs, not just because of the festivities, just because Mercury in the 10th house just is going to make you much more aware of it. But if you are wanting to change your professional prospects, this could be a good time to think about altering your CV, having different types of CV for different types of options, but basically weighing things up about how you connect to the wider world. And with Mercury inverting back into Sagittarius, that's asking you to think about the communicational part of the process in terms of knowledge. So that's the blend between the two areas, Aries. So Taurus, for you, Mercury moving into the 9th house can really trigger a desire to break out, do something more spontaneous. If you have really had your nose to the grindstone, you can't quite remember the time that you had a little bit of a break, this is a wonderful time to create some variety and stimulation. But of course Capricorn is a very serious sign. But so the travel you do could be to do with your work. It may be that you're actually thinking in some way about a contract, or you're talking to someone around a deal that could be interesting to you. Once Mercury inverts back into Sagittarius, that's more the money side of it. The Capricornian side of it for you is more about the principles, the terms of reference. And it's important, therefore, to make sure the details work for you. What about things like communication in romance? Well, it's interesting because the 8th house that Mercury will invert back into is very much where we're most invested. And Mars is going to be in Sagittarius, and by the very end of the year, and is going to be joined by Venus. But at the moment, we have the Sun there as well. So there is a kind of intensity going around. The 9th house can also be about escaping from intensity that's not working for you. It all depends on your unique circumstances, to be perfectly honest. But certainly getting genned up on things, getting more information could be something that you have an immediate desire to do. Or if you have knowledge that you want to share, you could find yourself formulating some courses and that type of thing. Or perhaps redoing your website, engaging much more with the possibilities for higher education. All of those are options at this time. But if in a romantic situation you are feeling a little bit frustrated, one of the things you can do is use Mercury's desire in the 9th house to get to what really is the nub of any issues that may, up until now, have not been completely resolved. So Gemini, Mercury is obviously your ruler, so it gifts you a lot of the skills that you can use during this transition, but in different ways. So in the sign of Capricorn, it's asking you to dive deep. There may have been some discussions recently, Mercury in Sagittarius, and for you, it could be that some fine words have been uttered. But what Mercury in Capricorn asks you to do is don your proverbial detective's mac and really understand what the true meaning is behind those utterances. So it's basically decoding things, understanding the subtext. Now, it's possible that this could be around a relationship or even a business involvement. And once Mercury inverts back into Sagittarius on the 23rd, maybe there's going to be some kind of shift. And something that wasn't quite working for you before can be resolved, or what looks promising now can get into a bit of a muddle. By the end of the year, because there is going to be Mercury in its retrograde, Mars and Venus all in your 7th house, and all being squared up by either Neptune in the case of Mercury and Mars, or Saturn in the case of Venus, it's possible that it's your professional relationships that these discussions need to be most carefully worked with. And I really would scrutinise what's said to you. That's where that more authoritative energy of Capricorn can come in. You're probably someone who's pretty shrewd anyway at analysing where people are coming from. But this is a time to just keep your natural bubbliness a little bit more detached and just be very cool and just really peer into the reality of where people are coming from. But also a very good time to think about those longer term resources. So if you've yet to write a will, if you've yet to discuss some pension information, this would be a great time, but particularly up until the 13th of December before the retrograde begins. So Cancer, for you, Mercury moving into the sign of Capricorn is actually really brilliant, because moving through Sagittarius, it's in the most brittle part of your situation, the 6th house, so more Virgoan. So little things could have niggled and irritated you. Mercury moving into the 7th house, it gets easier to just say, oh well, you don't quite see it the same as me, that's fine. You can take a little bit of a more detached view of things. It's a bit Libran in a way, Mercury in the 7th house. But also, if you're needing to work with people and you need to set your terms of reference, the host here, Capricorn, helps you to do it in a business-like way. But just be aware that, of course, the retrograde begins the middle of the month, but then because Mercury returns back into Sagittarius, however much you try to find that common ground, there may still be some some area that's just proving to be a bit frustrating, and that could go on right through to the middle of January because of the role of Neptune. So just being really conscious of the details is especially important over this next 9-week period. So Leo, Mercury moving into Capricorn is absolutely brilliant if you've got some last minute things you need to get done, ready for the Christmas rush. Your attention to detail, your passion to make sure that you can give your guests the best experience possible. And of course Pluto's been in Capricorn, apart from those 11 weeks earlier this year, for over 15 years. So you've had a lot of experience in bending into other people's needs. And Mercury in the 6th house is very Virgoan-like, really. But whatever you're doing, you're wanting to come up with solutions that really do give you some kind of solid outcome. So that's the 6th house energy. What happens when it goes retrograde on the 13th? Well, that could cause some mischief, particularly around appointments. Appointments that are in the diary could be changed. Perhaps you're going to have a need to change them. Perhaps it could be just a sort of regular health check that suddenly becomes unavailable. That kind of stuff can be irritating and frustrating. What about when Mercury returns back into the sign of Sagittarius on the 23rd? Well, the 5th house is about the social world and also your relationship with your children. And it can be about romance. So if you do get talking to someone and you're single at the moment, it wouldn't be an entire surprise if it was through your work, but it could be a little bit fluid, I feel, especially with the fact that you'll have Mars and by the end of the year Venus all in your 5th house. Your social situation is really going to be quite bright in between Christmas and the New Year, but it's all about Neptune, because Neptune is that swirling mist in your 8th house of where we're really getting intimate, where we're most invested, where we really want to be loved up. But you've got to make sure that whatever you really want is shared by the other side, or you both agree of what works for you both at that particular time. But some very practical issues may need grappling with for the first 2 weeks of December for sure. So Virgo, the transition of Mercury into the sign of Capricorn is really good because it can give you a greater desire to be more outgoing, more playful, and also the joke side of life can be enriched by this transition. And you're going to have Venus move on to the 4th into your 3rd house, which also is very communicational. So I think things are going to be quite bright and bubbly and will build up in that way as the weeks go on. What about the retrograde? Well, I guess, the 5th house is where we're wanting to be more playful and even dating and stuff. Is there someone that you're going to sort of form an attraction with in the run-up over Christmas? And then once Mercury moves back into your 4th house, maybe you've got to have to be more mindful how everything feels. I think as the year ends, it's a lot to do with how everything feels as far as Mercury is concerned for you. So Libra, Mercury moves to join Pluto in your 4th house, home, emotion, family. Mercury in the 4th house can be a little bit tricky. It's almost like we find it much harder to say what's on our minds. You're also going to have Venus move out of your sign and into Scorpio on the 4th, but that actually can be good for your finances. So maybe something to do with a home-based business or hobby can actually come back to you in a very productive way over the next couple of weeks. But with then Mercury going retrograde on the 13th through to the 23rd, that 10-day period, there definitely could be some mixed communications with loved ones. I think you've learned over the years to have very low expectations around some people, and you're almost going to be able to anticipate who the people are that are going to muck you around. But remember, Mercury can be something, the retrograde, that we can plan for and set our reactions up in advance. So you have a great amount of experience now of this part of your situation coming under the astral spotlight because of Pluto. So Mercury here now might also mean that you're prepared to actually communicate some emotional home truths to someone in your immediate circle, and it wouldn't be a surprise if it was a sibling. So Scorpio, for you, Mercury moving into your third house is definitely going to see an uptick in the speed of communication that's going between you and others. Because Jupiter is in your opposite sign, that can be where we relate and can also be a contract, the third house. There could be some very constructive discussions that go on with the help of that Mercury-Jupiter influence that is going to be repeated twice in its exact form. So that can be exciting. You've also got Venus arriving in your sign on the 4th, which is going to be a big pep for you. It's going to bring you into the moment. You're going to feel more self-confident. And of course, Venus and Mercury are then going to collaborate really well. So there's a lot to be excited about for this for you. What is perhaps the main niggle? I think it's not so much the retrograde. I think it is Mercury inverting back into Sagittarius. I think that could be a bit more challenging. If you are trying to work on something to do with, getting the foundations of your existence a bit more steady, this can all look very, very bright, but then you may find that there are some things that still need a little bit more attention, and that could be the case as you go into the new year. But do know that by the middle of January, you're really going to be moving forwards. And I feel that your ideas sector is really going to be stimulated in a very positive way by this transit. Sagittarius, Mercury moving out of your sign initially and into Capricorn can be extremely good for your finances, particularly as Mercury is then going to angle up in that extended way with your ruler Jupiter. So the next few weeks I think can be very encouraging. Mercury moving back into your sign on the 23rd of December suggests that not every idea you've got is necessarily really going to get seeded down and shoot, give you the rewards you want. So just be realistic about that. Some of the things you're going to do are going to work really well. Other things may be a bit so-so. If you can be a little bit more philosophical about that, if anyone can be, it's you, then that will help you to really just be very optimistic that something is going to shape up in a very positive way for you over the next few weeks. So Capricorn, Mercury moving into your sign is definitely a big plus because it brings you into the moment. Mercury in the 12th can make us feel a bit detached from others. It can feel that others aren't in touch, they're not wanting to make the effort to reach out. As soon as it comes into our sign, those kind of things drift away. Now, of course, Mercury is going to go retrograde in your sign in the middle of the month. And perhaps you are going to try to do something that you're hopeful about, but because the Sun and Mars are still locked away in your 12th house, maybe what you really need to speak about, Mercury, is your feelings, something that relates to your past. Once Mercury returns to your sign on the 23rd, there could be a sense that you're slipping back down the snakes and ladders about one particular strand. But actually it just may mean that there's more refinement required. You're actually ending this year really strongly. It's all about whether you're going to let the energy of Neptune affect you, either at the end of this year or the start of next year. Are you going to let Neptune's square to Mercury affect you? Are you going to get disempowered because your emotional world or the responses you get aren't quite feeding you as much as you want? So if you really want to be single-minded and focus on what's really important for you, this is definitely a helpful transit. But don't get distracted by the things you can't really control or by any kind of lack of self-belief. Aquarius, Mercury moving into Capricorn is your 12th house. Now, because you have the Sun and Mars in a very sociable part of your situation, I feel that perhaps what you're being asked to be mindful of, particularly from the 13th to the 23rd, is those old fair weather friends. So as much as Mercury moving to the 12th house can make you a little bit needing of some quiet and reflection, the Sun and Mars are still urging you to join in to the max. You can do both. You just need to give yourself permission to have some time out, turn your phone off, give yourself time to breathe a little bit and let some of the things that have happened just percolate through your system. Mercury in the 12th house. Mercury in the 12th house with the retrograde in the 13th, however, I feel that those fair weather friends was one strand that could come up. Maybe it's just actually coming to terms with some of your own fears and anxieties that maybe you sort of do know about but don't really like talking about, don't really want to touch upon them. It's a bit sore. Better to just move them to one side and focus on something that's engaging and interesting. But actually, the more we take in our shadow side, the more we heal ourselves. So see Mercury retrograde from the middle of the month as an opportunity to do that. And then someone who may have seemed very out of touch and distant is suddenly going to be in touch in a big way from the 23rd. People, eh? So Mercury moving into the sign of Capricorn for you, Pisces, is perfect for this time of year because it's very sociable. It's about the network and your connections. But that network and connections is going to come under scrutiny from the time of the retrograde mid-month. And then, of course, Mercury inverts back into the sector to do with work. Perhaps your network is a lot to do with your profession. And that's what the next couple of months can be about in a big way. Because the Sagittarius part of your chart, your responsibilities, your role in life, is going to stay very much at the core of things as we turn into the new year. So it's not just the ambitions you have, it is a case of who as much as what you know. So continue to build up those links. But of course, you know, maybe when the retrograde occurs, you may feel that, you know, you're not quite being kept in the loop, that social things are going on, it's not quite including you. Well, actually, it's partly because you are manifesting a desire to raise your profile to do with your professional world. And if you're not totally focused on that, then that can suffer, but also maybe the friendship and the sociability thing too. So maybe you need to make some trades at this important part of your progress. And I think that Sagittarius energy is so strong at the moment that going for big ambitions is important, and don't get too distracted by invitations and stuff that are more outside of the main core of what you're trying to achieve. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please see the link beneath this video where you can check out my testimonials. But for now, if you would kindly like, comment, share or subscribe, that would be absolutely wonderful. Thank you.